And now joining me to shed more light on this is Sarah Jackson, Deputy Regional Director, Amnesty International. Welcome to NTV.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll start with your comment on why we've had more opposition against the Anti-Homosexuality Act, more pronounced than those against the Public Order Management Act.
Well, what we've tried to do with this report is place it within the broader context. And to show that there are other repressive laws like the Public Order Management Act, other discriminatory laws like the Anti-Pornography Act. I think what happened with the Anti-Homosexuality Act is that there was widespread international outrage about this specific piece of legislation, but there wasn't the same attention on other pieces of legislation. So what we're trying to do is place it within that broader context of what's happening here in Uganda today.
All right. Just as we were concluding the story, Father Lokodo made a few statements about the report, calling it biased and shallow. What's your comment on that?
Well, the report is based on a wide number of sources, it's verified, and it draws on the real experiences of people. It documents journeys of pain. It's anything but shallow. It's actually very deep and it's very touching.
What specific examples, you do say that, you know, it's drawn from sources of pain or stories of pain. Do you have specific examples of abuse because of the Anti-Pornography Act, for example?
Of course. We have cases of women who were undressed, mobbed in the street just after the Anti-Pornography Act was passed, was signed into law, even before it became law itself. Cases of women in the old taxi park in Kampala being undressed, being stripped in the street. We also have the case of the lawyer Lillian Drabo, who was threatened with arrest because of what she was wearing in court. If a lawyer who defends the rights of other people, who knows her own rights herself, is at risk in a public place, what space is there for other women? And while these cases have tailed off over recent months, it continues to reinforce societal discrimination. So it's very concerning. The government committed to reviewing this law, but 7 months on, that review's yet to happen. All right.
The police is not actively implementing, for example, the Public Order Management Act, and yet you still feel that, Amnesty International still feels that the environment is not safe. Why do you feel like the environment isn't safe?
Well, the Public Order Management Act is still being implemented in that organisations who want to hold a public gathering, a public rally, have to notify the police in advance. What we haven't seen over the past few months is the police breaking up demonstrations, invoking the Public Order Management Act to do that. And that comes after a meeting between the police, opposition parties and civil society. But it remains on the books, and there's a widespread understanding that you have to ask permission rather than notify the police to hold these gatherings. And it has a chilling effect, including on the ability of groups to challenge these laws themselves.
All right. In some quarters of your condemnation of a law against gay rights, for example, and the Anti-Pornography Act, can be viewed as a form of cultural imperialism. What's your comment on that?
Well, we respect all cultures, but Amnesty International also believes that these are core human rights. These are human rights that you would want your brother, your sister, your mother to have. And so it's really in that vein that we're trying to produce a factual record of what has happened with the implementation of these laws and the misunderstanding of some of these laws by the general public.
All right. What are the wider implications of, having these three pieces of legislation?
Well, really they amount to an assault on human rights. It's the cumulative impact, and there's other legislation which might be coming through to regulate NGOs as well. So it's not just one law alone, we're looking at what the impact is of the laws taken together.
All right. Father Lokodo mentioned that maybe people misunderstand the law, and that's why they behave the way they do. For example, the Anti-Pornography Act, having women stripped naked, maybe in the old taxi park. Is it because that we don't understand the law, or is it our implementation of the law?
I think there's something in that, actually, with both the Anti-Homosexuality Act, which has been nullified by the Constitutional Court, and the Anti-Pornography Act. They were misunderstood by the public. But it's the government who has a responsibility to explain to the public, and we really encourage the Inspector General of Police in our meeting with him and his team yesterday to do more to explain these laws to the public to avoid that misunderstanding.
All right. Last but not least, what is the human rights trend in the region generally?
Well, we do find a trend towards more repressive legislation in a number of countries. Of course, Rwanda is a prime example, but there's been new legislation being proposed in Kenya as well to regulate NGOs as well. So it's not just
Uganda.
Here in Uganda that we see this trend, and indeed Amnesty International works on these issues the world over. We're a people's movement with 3 million members and supporters in 150 countries, including over 1,000 members here in Uganda. And we work on issues around freedom of association, around the police in several countries, including in the US and Western Europe.
Oh, thank you very much for taking time
Thank you.
to speak to us. Been talking to Sarah Jackson, the Deputy Regional Director, Amnesty International, shedding more light on the recently released Amnesty International report.